Hi, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson. This is the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. We're streaming on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and AM950radio.com. But if you go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and my Facebook page, which is Santita Jackson and Friends, you can see all of us on camera and you can get a chance to put some and these thoughts and these ideas. And so please, please, please like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson Show on YouTube and become my friend on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. So let's get right to it. Tomorrow, well, actually today, by the time this show airs, it will be May Day. We're going to be talking about labor because indeed we need to talk about labor and really their convergence with these movements. Labor always has unions have a great role to play in these movements all around the world. And so we want to get everybody involved. We'll be talking about that in the next hour, but everything that we're talking about today, all roads lead to these student protests that are breaking out all over the country, indeed, all over the world. You've got the children and the people of Palestine cheering you on, particularly those of you in America. And we've got two of you with us today because everyone knows that America is funding this war. But everyone does not know who's leading this protest. As we are always aware of anti-Semitism, and we are all our hearts are with anyone who feels fearful, whether the fears are founded or not. Anti-Semitism is real, but the anti-Semitism is not emanating from these safe spaces, and we need to talk about it. Indeed, much of this movement is being led by young Jewish people. Be very, very clear. They have taken the lead on this along with their Palestinian brothers and sisters, our children. And so have Black students. We've got someone from and HBCU. That's right. Trinice Robertson from FAMU, from the Youth Action Fund. I'm so proud of you, girl. And of course, I'm a Howardite, so I'm excited about that. And we've got Mar from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, joined by Alex Nelson from If Not Now, of course, University of Madison. You at University of Wisconsin at Madison. You all are now the new Ivies. Did you see that in Forbes? Oh my gosh, you're the new Ivies. I'm not mad at you. Go, go, go. Cameron Barnes, National Youth Director for Rainbow Push. And of course, Attorney Darrell Jones. I'm bringing all the old folks in last. Attorney Darrell Jones from the Transformative Justice Coalition and the elder statesman. I know he's going to be mad that I've said this. Dwight McKee, he is the senior advisor to Dr. Cornel West in his presidential bid, but he's also he's been a student leader 60 years ago. He is one of the founding members of Operation Push. He worked with Reverend Jesse Jackson and Operation Breadbasket and many of the historical figures who you read about. Reverend Abernathy, Dr. King, Reverend James Bevel, Reverend Wyatt T. Walker, Reverend C.T. Vivian. These are people who helped to train Dwight McKee, and he headed our youth division. Alex, he'd be a great person for you to talk to here because he really understands these movements. And he said to If Not Now, when you appeared on my other show early on, he said, "Look, I want to talk to you about what you're up against, how they're going to come after you, which is what we're beginning to see with the smearing of these students. Indeed, we see in one protest, a young man, God bless him, was carrying the Israeli flag. He shouted, 'Kill all the Jews,' and all of the students were arrested, but he was let go. How does that work? Got to think about that, everybody, because you should not throw that charge around lightly. It's not funny, and it's not something that you toy with. It's not something that you toy with. I don't play with anti-Black racism because it's real. But if you abuse it, people will not believe you, and they'll beat you up about it. We've got to talk about this, but let's talk about these student demonstrations, these protests. What are you looking to do? What are you asking for? Why are you doing this? And let me start with Mar from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And then, of course, Trinice, I'm going to bring you on from FAMU down there. And boy, what is going on in Florida? But that's another conversation for another time. But you've got it going on down there. But Mar, let's start with you. You have an encampment now at the University of Wisconsin at Madison.
Yes, correct. We started the encampment yesterday morning at around 10 a.m. The student group Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, is our chapter, and we started the encampment yesterday. And we've been successful so far. We're still camping out today.
What prompted you to start the encampment?
I think a lot of students are really looking for the university to divest from its investments in funding this current genocidal war that is happening in Gaza. Specifically, some of the demands that SJP has asked for is that they divest from any occupation, borders, and prisons from Palestine to Djope, um, and by divesting from all of these companies that are currently on the AFSC list that they have linked in our Instagram. They also want us to disclose all UW Foundation investments, cut ties with Israeli institutions, call for the immediate and permanent ceasefire to end the ongoing genocide and end to the siege of Gaza, get cops off campus, and stop the land grabs and cease expansion in order to house the current Palestinian community on campus.
Mm. So, h- how have you been received by the university? Are you hearing anything about suspensions and things like that? We understand uh, as of Tuesday morning that they are going to suspend the students at Columbia University.
Yes, so our university prior to the encampment sent out an email to all campus students um, outlining Chapter 18 of our campus law that basically outlined what students protesting rights are. And they have made it very clear that if any student protesters associated with the encampment break any of those chapter guidelines, they will be subject to arrest. They have brought in four different police jurisdictions and have been housing them in our Fluno Center, which is about 2 blocks from the encampment. So far, there's been not any interactions with the police. And the encampment has been peacefully protesting for the last 24 hours, and we have not had any run ins, but it remains to be seen any of those violations get um, if any of those violations occur and students are ending up being arrested. Right now, when you enter the encampment, there are sheets that basically guide our guidelines to peacefully protesting and peacefully occupying a space. And so, hopefully, if we can stay in line with those guidelines, we won't have any issues here.
Mm. Trinice Robertson at FAMU from the Youth Action Fund. Uh, I understand that HBCUs are getting involved in this struggle and have been ever since the beginning. What's happening down there?
So currently right now, the only official action that has been done by FAMU has been a protest that took place in January. Sadly, in terms of encampments, the only encampment that is taking place in Tallahassee, Florida, is Florida State University. But me and some of my peers, we have appeared at the camp to visit in the last couple of days. It's just been really hard to get people, unfortunately, because it's either people care but they're not sure how to get involved, or they care but they do not understand how the Black struggle is interconnected with the Palestinian struggle, or they care and they just don't understand what's going on, period.
Mhm.
So it's just been really hard to like gather folks together to mobilize, especially since sadly sometimes FAMU does suppress student activists. Um, Last year, during the hearing for House Bill 999, this was the bill that essentially banned and defunded diversity, equity, inclusion programs. Plenty of FAMU students came out and spoke, and we were told by administration to not refer to the fact that we were FAMU students. So
Hmm.
just based off of that example of us just defending for our right for our D9 organizations to exist, or for something as low stakes as that in comparison to fighting for Palestine. I'm nervous to see what they might do to us if we were to even do anything, because they often try to and I want to say intimidate us in comparison to PWIs. They're more likely to guilt trip us by saying, if you speak up on this, then we might lose funding.
Hmm.
We already don't get funded enough as HBCUs.
Yeah.
So oftentimes we get guilted just based off that one fact. Um, but all the work that I've been doing with FSU has been extremely peaceful. On my first day there, we sung movement songs. We were singing songs like ain't nobody gonna turn me around.
Hmm.
This songs that our elders, well, my elders, my elders and elders and ancestors have sung like not that long ago. It's been extremely peaceful. Any agitators we experience have been mostly from white men, one of which was a white boy wearing a Hawaiian costume, going to a bar crawl, and he just started yelling at us saying Palestine is not a real country, and just started getting aggressive up to the point that the police had to like remove him from the space. Um, but yeah, in terms of FAMU, most likely for the most part, I would like for us to have a better turnout at some point and to not be intimidated, which I guess might be hard to do considering the fact that unfortunately FAMU does have strong ties to Israel.
Mm. You know, you shouldn't feel uh, that this is unique. Black schools tend to be very conservative because they are underfunded, and they tend to they're much more careful. But when my parents were at North Carolina A&T, the reason my father transferred to North Carolina A&T State University, which was a college then, was because of the student sit-in movement that had really taken off there. You really, really saw it germinate at Fisk University, but it really took off in Greensboro. So my father decided to go there. And there was a lot of pushback that they would get from the administration and from their parents because they didn't want their children to get in trouble. Just get an education. I don't want you to have any trouble. I want you to have a good life. But I think you're doing the right thing. Don't worry about it. But there is intersectionality here with the Palestinian struggle. And indeed, uh, really the person who pushed Palestinians onto the American stage has been a black man. It was Reverend Jesse Jackson in his presidential campaigns. And before that, in his trips to the Middle East in the late 70s and the early 80s. So we have been at the center of this struggle because you could not mention the proper noun Palestinian up until really the Jackson campaigns because he forced it as an issue, Dwight, onto the national stage. Dwight McKee?
Yeah, that's correct. But I think that what the students are lacking is not just that perspective, but perspective on the historical context of where this fits and how it's interlocked in their own oppression. Um, you can't separate George Floyd's death from the police being trained by the Israeli military. You can't separate the police oppression that's happening in these colleges, and it happens in the city every day, from Israel helping to militarize the American police force and turning them into, a police force into a military operation. You can't separate this apartheid system, which is set up to dominate the Middle East, from the same colonial powers that set the South African government up, that set the colonial systems in Africa up, that are those who spearhead that level of oppression, because they are the dominant people who are in charge of, world domination. And so if you understand, if our students understand the context of what they're dealing with, now they will understand it once they understand the level of oppression that they're going to be subjected to. Because I think that's going to be new for a lot of students who really believed in the context, believed in the notion that this was a democracy and they had the right to protest. But now that they're going against the real power structure and the real corporate structure, they're going to be treated the same way we were treated when we were trying to march for freedom. And I think for a lot of these white students, that's going to be new. The black students, I think, once they begin to understand the continuity between how they are dominated culturally by many of the Zionists and how they have been misled in their understanding of how culture is formulated. And a lot of these guys that they thought were a little nutty, like Kanye, that even though he is in some levels a little out of balance, that some of what he was saying was true in terms of there's a cultural domination and a media domination by many of these people who are whose interest it is manipulate the narrative when it comes to Palestine and the right of Europeans to colonize anywhere they see fit.
Alex Nelson, and you see this power structure going after their children, but we've seen that before. And it's just when I see these young people, when I see that these students at Columbia have been suspended as of today, that goes on your record. That can impede you from getting into graduate school, getting a job. A suspension in college is a very serious deal. And at the same time, I see the corporate media not not telling us what Mar told us, not telling us what Trinice told us. Hey, this is what we're fighting for. They're not representing who are at the encampments. They're not representing Jewish young people, Palestinian young people, and Black young people who are on those campuses, and all. I mean, just keep the LGBTQ plus. Everybody's out there, and the education that's going on. And really, what do you make of that? Starting there, Alex.
And thank you, Santita, for having me on for this
Always.
discussion today. It's obviously, I think, top of mind for everybody. I do think the suspensions are terrible because, as you mentioned, it can have profound implications on people's future abilities for gainful employment, for graduate school. I can also only imagine how furious you would be if you were paying this institution and for them to utilize your tuition dollars, for them to yield to come back to you, and they're using that to fund all these sort of, I'm going to call them security measures, but they're obviously not security measures on campus. So NYU putting up barricades and, and having people, in the case of Columbia, bringing NYPD onto campus to violently intercede with students who are just engaging in a peaceful encampment. So it's a profoundly upsetting experience. And I think the students who are standing up to their administrations are incredibly brave. And I think that they are building a foundation for tremendous solidarity. So I'm tremendously impressed with them. I don't think the colleges, not only are they not right morally, ethically, all of those things, but I think these punitive measures against these students are going back to bite them in a real big way. You cannot have a college without students. So if you continue to drive your students off of campus, who are you left with?
So I think this will drive some students away from these schools.
I don't know. And I think maybe some of our student activists on the call can answer these questions a little bit better. But I know if I was still in school, I would have tremendous conflicts about, sending my tuition dollars to an institution that was going to, in the case of Columbia University, they evicted students and threw all their belongings out of the rooms and into alleyways. That's a real concern for people. Now, where do they sleep? What do they do? New York City it's the epicenter of one of the most expensive housing crises in the country. So if your school evicts you, where are you expected to sleep? Where are you expected to spend the night? So these are real profound issues. And I think that the administrations that are enacting these punitive measures are short-sighted. They are standing on the wrong side of history. And I foresee this having repercussive consequences for them in the long term. But I commend the students for their bravery.
Oh, I do too. But what you just mentioned happened to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's daughter.
Yeah.
She said she came and her things had been tossed out of her room. Did you know that, Mara and Trinice?
No, I did not know that. I definitely did see the whole throwing people's personal objects out. That's why even for the first day of encampment, I really didn't bring too many things with me. Because I'm like, I know I have finals and I probably should bring my laptop to work on my papers, but I don't feel safe because I don't know if Tallahassee Police Department would just throw myself out if they arrested me. But even going back to what Alex has said about like students being deterred from participating in academia, I definitely agree with that. Even right now, currently, I'm in my senior year. I want to become a professor, and I want to continue my education at some point. But now with all this information coming out and the way that these universities are treating students, I'm extremely hesitant to even like continue on beyond my bachelor's at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know because like most of these institutions that could provide me opportunities, they're the main ones refusing to divest or disclose to the public. I mean, disclose to the public about how much they're sending I'm sorry, sending money out to Israel, or willing to even like offer divestment or even hear students out. Because in Vanderbilt, that was like the first encampment I kept track of because one of my colleagues was there. They pretty much started their protests and stuff mostly because the students had asked for them to vote on divestment. It was everything was already set, and then out of nowhere, the university decides to cancel it on them. Um, and pretty much what that explains to me, if these Ivy League big universities and stuff are willing to just ignore certain voices, they're the ones paying them. I feel like people forget that at universities, they're the employees and you're kind of a customer. I don't like that model, but that's unfortunately that's how it's set up in this capitalistic state. But at the end of the day, like these are students, they paying for a service that's for y'all to educate them. They don't like the idea of y'all funding using their money, which funds you and provides you your paychecks, to put that money into something that they don't believe in, aka human rights violations. Um, so yeah, I feel very off with academia at this point in time,
Well, Mar,
personally.
Mar, do you feel the same way? Because we know that when you go to graduate school, you're interviewed. But even for the Ivies, you're interviewed for an undergraduate spot. That happened to me, and I ran up against a headwind as Reverend Jackson's daughter, given the fact that Reverend had come out in favor of Palestinian rights, balanced with Israeli justice, but I mean security, but they didn't hear that. And there was a fight to get me a seat, which I got, but it was what they wanted me to do was to, they said, would I be willing to be independent of my father and his politics?
Mm,
And
yeah.
mind you, that was 40 years ago. So I know that these, I mean, and I'm going to defer to the lawyers, to Attorney Jones and to Reverend Dr. Uri Esquire, about whether that's legal or not. I mean, whether students
Yeah.
have the right to push back. I mean, Mar, how do you feel?
I think students here at UW, we have been, especially marginalized students, and I'm talking Black, Brown students, we have felt abandoned by our university and our governance. Just earlier this fall, there was a vote in our congressional chamber to eliminate funding from DEI programs in a statewide decision in all UW schools. And where there was extreme outrage to that decision, students were only known about that 2 days before the decision was actually decided on. And we were told then that our freedom of expression and our rights to free speech about how we were upset about this wasn't as valid. And so we have had the debate about free speech and freedom of expression on our campus since the fall. And then now in the spring, we're coming together to protest peacefully for justice in Palestine, for divestment. And again, we are met with these barriers. And so I think a lot of marginalized students are concerned because we want our freedom of speech, our freedom of expression protected just like everyone else. But it seems like when there's issues, our issues on the table, that seems to be an ideal that is debatable. And that's really scary to me as a student. And it makes me distrust academia, and that's as someone who I study educational studies. I want to be in higher education. I hope to one day work in a DEI space at a university because I want to protect students who look like me. And I am still having doubts about whether I belong in that space because we're not feeling productive.
Wow, Reverend Dr. Yuri and Daryl Jones. Reverend Dr. Yuri, what do you say to Mara and to Trinice? I mean, this is like limiting they are looking at, wait a minute, I don't know how I can proceed. Well, maybe not proceed in the United States, but you might feel more comfortable getting out of the United States. I don't know. What do you say?
Well, good afternoon to you and these very courageous students. A couple of things is one, part of organizing is not only coordinating the action, but understanding the reaction. The reaction can take a number of forms. Many times they are either suppressive or oppressive, sometimes a blend of both. And it's important to be informed going in because there could be collateral consequences down the road. So the reason I think we're seeing at some of these universities the threat of some disciplinary action, interim suspension, emphasis on interim, because it starts a process, it doesn't finalize a process. And probably because they don't have the process worked out. But the second thing is it's intended to squelch the expanding solidarity movement happening on campuses across the country and happening just before the largest celebration on just about any college campus is commencement. Commencement often coincides with a coordinated and scheduled meeting of the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees has to ratify and approve the final graduation list, authorize the president to confer the degrees. That's why you see the clause that speaks to the governance of the university on everybody's degree, whether it's a baccalaureate, master's, or terminal, a doctorate degree. So when we look at this, they are using this convergence. They're trying to take the pressure of commencement and saying, we'll cancel commencement, we'll do virtual commencement, we'll go inside. All of this is intended to try to disrupt under the guise that a lot of this coordination is due to outside agitators who are fueling the dissent on the campus. So it's a pretty classic response that we've seen before. And what's really intended to come out of it is a sense of intimidation to cause folks to retreat. I will say that all of the components that we have heard from the students fit within the assessment, because there will be an attempt by some state powers institutionally to penalize certain state schools, publicly funded schools, for not coming down very heavy on students and tie not only potential funding, but potential disruption to the administration and the governance side. Folks may actually lose their jobs if they don't do certain things at the behest of a government that's trying to stifle speech. And so as we see this solidarity continue to expand, you're going to see more kind of knee-jerk reactions, and they will try to hopefully avoid getting the police involved, or even worse, somehow, you know, I loathe to think that there's a governor somewhere that might use this as a justification to activate the National Guard as if we have some civil disturbance. These are civil protests. These are not uprisings. You don't see any assault on persons. Now they say, and we heard it today with the proposal of a bipartisan bill to amend Title VI, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, to put an explicit and express definition of anti-Semitism in the statute to be able to affect the federal funding. The federal funding for universities is largely by way of being able to access student loans and Pell Grants. And if you can't access those funds for underserved, under-resourced students, they can't afford to go to college. So it's all a shell game. Let's be real clear, which is why the clarity of the protest must remain crystal clear, and that the students not get distracted by the noise that's intended actually to get them off balance and to take them off message. And so that's important that they remember. That's why if we go back and look at the history of the civil rights movement and sit-ins, there was always training and conversation and retraining to understand that the objective is this. The actions we will take are these. These are the responses that we might encounter. And even if we do, our response must be nonviolent. Otherwise, we validate and justify the response that the universities, and in some instances, the government, whether it's local police or state governments, are looking to use. They just don't have the justification they've been seeking. And if they can't seek it, they'll try to create it by some artificial mechanism. And so we have to be really, really intentional to support these students, not only to stay engaged, but to stay focused and don't get caught up in the distraction that will take them not only off message, but also leave them in a more perilous and precarious situation because they've abandoned the focus of their protest to be able to respond to the distraction. So this is where the discipline of organizing and protesting has to remain clear, and they can't just gather. They have to meet, debrief, re-strategize, and come back at it time and again until they get the objectives that they are seeking, which may be more long-term than any of us wants to consider right now.
Well, you know, Daryl Jones, it's concerning to me. We just lost Marb. I hope she gets back. And let me bring Marb back on. That she doesn't feel protected by her university. And that's very unsettling. And then I hear Trinice say, and look, I went to an HBCU, and HBCUs are massively underfunded to the tune of about $16 billion all across the country. I mean, it is awful. And we're fighting for that. But oftentimes you do have conservative administrations, and they're trying to raise money. And I get it. But it seems that in this time, they might be suppressing dissent, Daryl.
Well, you know, Santita, I think that you're exactly on point. That's exactly what they're doing. And I tell you, you know, first, you know, let me give my kudos to all the students that have been brave enough to take the stands that they've been taking. You know, one of the things that I continue to lift up, and I will continue to lift up so long as there's breath in my body, is that whenever you see wrong, it's always the right time to do what you think is right. And that's what these students are doing. And one of the things that I'm very impressed by, you know, the last day or two over in Gaza, it was a 6-year-old boy that was killed, murdered by the Israeli bombing there in the Gaza Strip. It was in regards to the killing of Hin Rajab, that young boy, that the students in Columbia responded by taking over Hamilton Hall. It wasn't something that was just spontaneous with regards to being planned out and everything. This was a response to what was happening in Gaza. They were raising their voice. They were, were standing on their morals, standing on their principles, standing on that which they believed, and demanding the university do the right thing in this situation. The same is true, I suspect, of Mar and what she's doing at University of Wisconsin. The same is true at Northwestern and the other schools that are that it has spread to, that are taking up the cause of saying that we want a society where everyone's right to exist is respected. One of the things that gave me great pause was when Mar said that she didn't feel protected at her university because of the stand that she is taking. And it's a delicate balancing piece, perhaps, for the universities overall, because they're certainly balancing the First Amendment rights that they're teaching these students about and how to stand up and protect their rights, and they're balancing that against the safe environment of other students that are there. There's been a lot, and I think Reverend Yuri was going into it. There's been a lot of mischief that's been going on with regards to people going on and faking situations to try to escalate the scenarios on various college campuses. But it's so incredibly important and that the students be certain to remain focused, to be certain to remain, in the lane of doing that which they think is right, and not allowing the infiltrators, not allowing outside voices, not allowing outside agitators to come in and disrupt what their plan is. So I think that's a large part of what we're seeing. It's interesting to watch the universities try to cope with it. Different universities are taking different tactics. Was it Manoush Shafiq over in Columbia University? What you're seeing her do, she started doing the dance in front of Congress. And it was really Congress that was pushing her. And it was a response to her and Congress that the students reacted. And that's a part of what we see happening. Let's not forget, and one thing I really want to caution folks about, let's not forget that in the middle of this election season, you're going to see conservatives trying to take a hold of this issue and saying that we need law and order, we need to get this right, or we need to keep pushing the students because it's pushing away from the progressive and the Biden and all that faction. All that's going to start playing in to what we're seeing happen across this country, because if they can benefit by showing some division within anything, they're going to do it. And so that's why I think it's so incredibly important that these students remain united, they remain focused, and that they not allow themselves to be sidetracked by any of these other things that are going on to try to take the focus off of Gaza, off of their moral responsibility, and off of what they're doing. One of the things that that Todd Yuri laid out so greatly is that when they're talking about the boycott and the divestments and the sanctions, that to be certain to remain in that avenue and find out, what are the entities, what are the corporations that are involved, so that you can remain focused on that, because that's where their focus is. That's where their power is. And this is the season right now, this graduation season, where the Board of Regents and the Board of Directors are all coming to the campus. This is the time to have that focus, Santita.
But Alex.
Well,
Okay, well, Dwight, before I pivot to Alex, why don't you respond to that? Because I see Biden, Daryl doing the same thing. I mean, it's
see, that's where the breakdown is going to happen.
Not just the conservatives who are seizing upon this. You have Blinken, who walks in day one and declares himself a Zionist. You can't be a neutral. Mm-hmm. You can't be a neutral arbiter when you say that. You can't say, "Hey, you know what? The protests are fine, but you all are not. You're not empathetic enough with the Israelis. You're too pro-Hamas." What?
But let me tell you where the breakdown is going to come, where the impasse is going to come.
Where's the impasse?
In the negotiations, if the students maintain their negotiations around disinvestment, that's where the breakdown is going to come, because that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Because so much, you have to understand that colleges primarily, these are businesses, and they function somewhat by tuitions, but mostly by endowments, and then they invest those endowments. and much of that money is invested in a military industrial complex. And a lot of it is invested in Israeli companies because Wall Street, many of them are controlled by the Zionists. And so it's going to be an absolute non negotiable issue for the colleges to disinvest. That's going to be off the table. It's a lot different than when we was dealing with South Africa. We talking about boycotting Coca-Cola and boycotting, wedding rings, and this is this is the center of the American economy.
Mm-hmm.
These investments are, and they're how the wealthy maintain their wealth, not just with the power that comes from the military operation that keeps them in power, but the money that's made, the interest that's made off of these corporations and off of these investments. And so a company like DuPont, who for 300 years have been invested in war and have really reinvested that money in the economy and in a lot of these colleges, that money is locked into this worldwide oppressive system. And they control these colleges and these college boards, and they're not going to let that go. So it depends on how flexible the students are in the negotiations and how much they understand how severe of a crisis this is if they demand that.
And just what they're up against. Before I pivot to you, Minister Barnes, who I have to thank you so much, the National Youth Director for Rainbow Push, who brought Mar and Trinice to us because of the wonderful work that you've been doing, Minister Barnes, and I want to thank you for that. It's a tribute to to the work that you've been doing, that you were able to access these students, and thank you so much for that. But Alex, he speaks to something because we're in the election season. And I mean, there's so much that If Not Now are doing. And of course, you're from If Not Now Chicago. So, we're getting ready for August, and we are getting ready for August in the DNC.
Mhm.
How would you advise Trinice and Mar to handle saboteurs? Because we see at Northeastern University in Boston on Saturday night, you had 100 peaceful protesters, and then a young man walked in carrying an Israeli flag. He was one who was shouting, "Kill the Jews." They arrested the demonstrators. They did not arrest him. And the takeaway from that is you can't allow anti-Semitism, to be at the center of your demonstrations. And you see, I think I grew up under Dwight. We've seen the saboteurs coming. Someone who was in a planning meeting and they were the most radical of all. You were like, something's not right here because you're gonna get us hurt. So what do you tell Mar? Because they just opened up the encampments at University of Madison, University of Wisconsin Madison, which now has a new spotlight because you're one of the new Ivies. So that has heightened your profile this past week. And big ups to you. You're seeing FAMU, which has one of the top business schools in the country, HBCU or PWI. And she was told by the administration, look, we got to deal with our investments, which is what Dwight just said. So between the actual protest and when you're negotiating with the administration, what would you advise them to do?
Well, I would focus them to keep their eyes on the prize, which I think the students organizers have been doing a great job of. I think that the Jewish student organizers, important, have been doing a lot of demonstrations of Jewish faith and solidarity and spirituality. Like I know there have been Passover Seders at some of the encampments. There's been Shabbat celebrations. I think keeping that in intersectionality and interfaith celebrations in mind, I think does a lot to mitigate the discourse, because you can't. It really means these anti-Semitism allegations aren't sticking the way folks would hope they would, because you can say, no, there are Jewish students at the encampment, and not only are they there, but they're leading folks in prayer services, and they're openly Jewish, and they are practicing. And I know that that's true for Muslim students as well. They've had iftars, they've had evening prayer sessions. So I think that is just one essential thing to be mindful of. And, I think with the students who are actually at the negotiating table with their universities, just keep in mind that, history is on your side. I know folks have been talking a lot about the student encampments that led to Columbia University and others divestment from South Africa apartheid. So there are predecessors that have been successful. I think for some reason, in some ways, that this is a higher mountain to climb, because I think the way that the United States has just so deeply ingrained itself with the Israeli government, and the way that folks are, just are sort of insistent. And I think that there's oil money tied up in this, and there's military, weapons and military. We like having a little mini United States in the Middle East, to be frank. And I think that is a big part of why folks are so invested in Israel. But keep your eye on the prize. And in terms of in the case of saboteurs, do what you can to make sure that they are, deterred, and that they are kept out of the core organizing circles, and do your best to keep them on the outsides of the protests, because of course bad actors have a way of, they come in, they say violent, hateful things. And people people clip that and use that as the quick hit on social media, or the quick hit on the evening news. And I think it does detract from the message. But I don't think that's at the fault of the student organizers. I think that they're just bad faith actors. I think the media needs to step up to the plate and do much better job of showcasing what's actually happening and what's actually going on, and who's actually, the cause of a lot of these disruptions or this violent rhetoric. But yeah, it is a steep hill to climb, and it is a mountain to climb. But I know that moving the universities away from how they spend their endowments and how they invest their endowments, I think, can have a huge culture shift. So,
Minister Barnes, what are you seeing? I mean, as you talk to these students from predominantly white institutions, historically Black colleges and universities, these American universities, I have to tell you, Trinice Robertson from FAMU and Mar from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, we are so proud of you, because even in the face of all of it, these students, Minister Barnes, they're undaunted. I mean, they just keep plowing through. What are you seeing?
Very much so. First of all, certainly kudos to those that are participating in these demonstrations everywhere. And what I am seeing, Ms. Jackson, is I'm seeing protests and demonstrations at Brown, at Yale, at Harvard, at Emerson, at Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, Tufts, Cornell, Princeton, MIT, University of Southern California, UCLA, Northwestern, University of Michigan, Ohio State, University of Ohio, University of Chicago, Emory, Vanderbilt, University of North Carolina, both Charlotte and Chapel Hill, Florida State University, Arizona State. That's just a very small snapshot. And again, as we mentioned before, these are not spur of the moment kind of demonstrations. These are not some that were just, brought up by impulse. It is a very, very real conversation to be had, because what is being said by these young people is not the fact that they are not trying to be anti-Semitic by any stretch. That is not their goal. In fact, there are, as been stated, many Jewish students that are a part of not only a part of the protest, but the planning, the encampments, and the sustainability of such. So that is not what we're trying to go for here. But when we're talking about the divestment piece, when you talk about the BDS movement, it's more so that students want to shed light on those who are profiting from war. It's just black and white as it seems. They want to build the awareness and the issue that what we are doing is participating in a genocide. Young people have named this as, again, one of the most violent and blatant war crimes in modern American history, likening it unto apartheid, as we have said already. They are not going to go away. They are not going to just stop. There are some of them who have been arrested. I believe it was at Columbia, where they were arrested And there was another 100 students there the next day that were in place for everyone that had been arrested.
Mhm.
And it's so much of a layered topic because, again, I really want us to be talking about the response that is being given right now from these universities, from the law enforcement bodies that are governing these campuses and or these cities. The response to this is just basically demonizing those who are exercising their right, and calling forth an issue that has a humane ramification to it. This is not just, again, something that is cool or trendy. We're talking about a human rights issue, not so much as black, not so much as right, but a human rights issue. And I think that it is definitely noticeable that all of these young people across not just the Southwest, not just the North, South, East, West, Northwestern region, across the United States, across the globe, are seemingly on one accord.
Mhm.
But as Attorney Yeary has mentioned, what our job is as the young people doing it is to make this crystal clear. We do not want to get lost in the gray area of the noise of those, like, as you mentioned, at Northeastern, the people who are coming, who are paid organizers, paid agitators.
Sure.
They know exactly what they're going to do, and for their different behind closed door relationships, we could speculate as to why someone like that would not be arrested. But of course, all of the protesters are arrested. What we are seeing, and especially even at Northeastern, where faculty members have said, we've sat with
Mhm.
these encampments. These are peaceful protests.
Absolutely.
We can't let the media and other agitators and those who have this goal detour us from what we are going to do. As Attorney Yeary mentioned, it must remain crystal clear what our stance is.
I have to interrupt you here because we only have a couple of minutes, and I do want these students to close us out.
Mhm.
Mar, what do you want? What do you want us to know, and how can we support you?
I think, we just want eyes on our university. We have had a few news coverages happening over the last day, but our encampment, our movement is still young in comparison to some of these other encampments that have happened at other universities. And so I think I would just ask that you guys keep an eye out on UW Madison, on the SJP student organization. Check SJP. It's SJP and whisk underscore Y DSA and SJP UW Madison. Those are two organizations on my campus that you can keep up with to see what's going on right here in the moment on the ground. And, just keep supporting students' rights to freedom of expression and freedom of speech. We are peacefully protesting here right now, and we continue to plan to do so. So please just keep an eye and keep us in your prayers and keep up the good work. Thank you so much.
And we're going to shine a light on you. You have a home on this show, and so we'll be calling you and calling upon you to give us reports. Of course, Attorney Darrell Jones has a radio show. He and Attorney Barbara Arnwine. So they'll be calling upon you to give reports on their show. Rainbow Push has an internationally broadcast television show. They'll be calling upon you and Trinice to let us know what is going on. Because if we shine a light on this, you know, light kills all of the germs. Trinice, you'll give us the closing thought.
Yes. Mostly want to hop back on to what Cameron has said earlier about like not focusing too much on agitators. To those who are in camps, your mission is to not be there for the agitators and for the opposition. Your job as an organizer and as an activist is to be there for your community. And that community does include the Palestinian student population, which I really don't see get talked about enough sometimes. So if you do have a Palestinian classmate who are at the encampment or not, please check in on them to see how they're doing. This is probably already a lot for them, and I guess the encampments could even also be a lot with them with seeing open Zionists out and about as well. If you do want to keep track of what's happening in Florida, I do work at a nonprofit called Youth Action Fund that specializes in helping uplifting young voices in the state of Florida. We have been trying our best to keep track of all the encampments here in the state. For my specific encampment here in Tallahassee, which is located at Florida State University, I recommend following Tally Dissenters. Their Instagram handle is tally.dissenters. They've been posting updates of the encampment daily alongside with their other coalition members. But again, we just need to remember that this is about the Palestinian people, about their liberation as well as our own liberation. We're here for our communities. We're not here for hate.
Amen. Amen to that. And I want everyone to keep that in mind and know that this is a movement that has captured the hearts and minds and the bodies of everybody. You have Jewish, Muslim, Palestinian, American, Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ plus, Asian. I mean, everybody is in on this because this is a human rights issue, and we all have skin in this game. Let's talk about this, and let's talk about the role, Reverend Dr. Yuri and Attorney Darrell Jones and Minister Barnes in the next hour, as we talk about May Day, because that is what we're looking at. One of the critical groups who have helped push these movements into success, unions. How can we unite with working people of the world, or how can they unite with these young people to give them the support that they need? They have people, they have elders, they have money, and they also fight for those who are living under the boot of oppression, who they fight for the right to fight for the right. And let's do that. Mar from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, Trinice, the Youth Action Fund, FAMU, sending you so much love. We are so proud of you. And just let us know what is going on. We're going to have you on these media platforms, but we want you to know that you have a friend if not now, in Alex Nelson in Chicago. And so I'm going to connect all of you so that you can be in contact with each other, because it's important for us to know that we're not alone. You're not alone. We are with you. And your elders, the old folks here, Reverend Dr. Yuri, Attorney Darrell Jones, and I, and Dwight McKee, we're here for you. And we're going to do everything that we can to protect you. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And you're going to look back, and this will be one of the highlights of your lives. The fact that you stood up for your fellow human family, members of the human family. God bless you, everybody. Stay tuned for the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.